Hello, I'm Haley and welcome to my video about ShapeLab. So ShapeLab is a little bit of an intermediate 3D modeling software which recently got put on the headsets. And this video is going to be a short explanation on how to use the program, but they have a lot of guides online that also help you more in depth to learn the tools since it's such an advanced program. As you can see already on my screen, I'm going through the very daunting looking control panel on your left joystick, which basically has your brush settings, your sculpture brushes, your color brushes, and everything else regarding the program, basically all on your left controller. So here you can see I'm just showing you the more important details of the brushes individually. You can change the color, the size, the texture, and what makes this program so advanced is that not only does it have different shapes that you can use to mold or to sculpt, you can also adjust the finite things about the brushes, including the size, the weight. You can also adjust the pressure as well, texture, basically anything about the brush. This is a completely unique program that really takes 3D sculpting to a whole new level. And as you can see here, I'm also going a little bit more in the option setting of the panel. You can also take photos, change your environment, just a lot of details on this left-hand controller. And here you go, I'm changing the colors of the background. But if you're a little bit lost, ShapeLab also has a guide you can completely follow, which is completely user-friendly to the VR version and the computer version. And now onto the fun part about the program, which is sculpting. So here you can see on that left controller, you can adjust the size, strength, fall off, and resolution of your brush. While these settings do look a little intimidating, adjusting them to your preference is really useful in the long run. And so here you can also see I started off with a circle, but the circle has a mesh-like texture over it. And this texture can be removed in the settings easily. There's a simple button you can press, but basically it just makes it so that you can see the planes you're working with. Since this is a 3D modeling software, you have a lot of planes. It's not like working with regular clay where you're basically just making a shape. You're working with little shapes to create a smooth object. So you can see I'm just browsing through all the other brushes. The previous one I was using, which is the standard brush, I really do like it. It can add things and push things. It really does everything all in one. So I believe that's the best brush for beginners. I was using a bit of the flattening brush there. As you can see, I was having a little bit of difficulty with the ear. This is a completely new program for the VR headset. It has been used by professionals and in the industry on the computer software side. But for the VR headset, it is a little finicky at the moment. There are some small bugs that can potentially be fixed with future updates. But overall, I did have a good experience for my first time using this program. So you can see I'm adjusting more of the size and the strength of the brush just to make sure I really know what I'm going to get out of it. And also, as you can see, also when I'm doing the flattening brush on the front, the panels, the shape surface panels change because I'm making it flatter, making it into one big shape. So if you're a digital modeler or a 3D modeler, these panels really do help. And also there you can see I took them off just so you guys get a little bit of view. And I was trying to test out some more brushes, but since I'm relatively new to the program, a lot of these brushes are a little bit more complicated to use. You really have to adjust their settings to really get the best benefits out of them. And also each brush in the program will hold its same settings. So if I adjust this brush to have a strong strength, other brushes will not have that and they'll retain their original setting that you adjusted to. So it's just a little user friendly to do that. As you can see here, I was trying to make the nose and the brush was a little bit too big, so I made it a little bit smaller. But overall, ShapeLab is a really cool program. Once again, it is pretty new to the VR headset, so working on a 3D modeling software and a VR headset space was very interesting for me as well, because I've used mostly Gravity Sketch, as I said in my previous video. It's a little bit more of a cleaner program. This is more on the artsy side of 3D modeling, but I overall really enjoyed this program. So with future updates, obviously it could benefit from those as well. One thing about ShapeLab in particular, the computer program that I mentioned earlier can also work with the VR headset. So for the best performance, ShapeLab recommends that you attach your VR headset with a cord to your PC that has the actual ShapeLab program. It just makes everything run a little bit smoother. It can handle a little bit more, but it's completely capable of doing free roam VR, which I did in a complete open space on campus. So you can see adjusting that size again on the brush. I really do like how this panel is, by the way. It really does help that it's just right there and very easy. Some other programs the panel closes, but it's just a little bit easier like that. And here I was smoothing out everything. If I had the shape grid on, you would notice that the panels are getting smaller instead of bigger, because when you make something a little bit more clean and smooth, it creates more panels to really smooth out everything. And similar to other virtual reality drawing applications, overall the basics are very similar. Left hand usually has, or your non-dominant hand usually has your control panel, while the right is used as the joystick to control or draw. There's also a lot of complicated buttons on both of these controllers. My preference, I like to keep it very simple, so I use mostly just that one brush, but you can really experiment with this program. And once again, ShapeLab does have a lot of videos and complete, clear, written out instructions on their website to really help you learn a lot about the program itself. It also has versions for the VR headset and instructions for the PC application. Yep, and here you can see I was just making a little bear as for fun. There's also settings in this program where you can export this into Blender, or you can export this into other software. You can also use these models in any application such as Unity or anything like that, which I think is very, very unique. And working on a VR headset, it really just makes the experience a lot more unique. Yep, and here I am going back to that standard brush. Standard brush is definitely my favorite of all. And what I do find really interesting about the VR headset having this 3D application, as you can see right there, I was able to completely look around my object from different angles. It's just really a quality of life feature. And here I'm using a new tool just to test out some, which is a pinch tool, I believe. Basically, it just makes little points come out of the object. I swapped to a different brush as well. I was really trying to mess with a bunch of things, adjust the size as well. But as you can see, when I made it really big, the cursor became really big as well. So it made a more round shape instead of just a direct point with a smaller one. Yep, and there was the second brush that I swapped to as well. This one was a little bit more of a point, but overall the brushes are really interesting. I do really like a lot of them. I had fun modeling with a lot of them as well. There's some unique ones, such as there's a tentacle one. I know there's other ones that are also really unique that add texture. You could definitely play around with a lot of these. They're really, really great. And in the brush settings, you can change the color, you could change the size, the opacity, you could change the texture, the finish of the brush, and I'll get into those color selections as well in a second. But here I am just finishing up my sculpture. Yep. And now onto the fun part about the program, which is sculpting. And now on to my favorite part about any art application is the colors. And so my actual recording got a little corrupted through my headset for when I colored the bear itself, but here's just an in-depth look at the settings that I saw while coloring. So there's three main things called, there's metalness as a finish, there's roughness as a finish, and emission as a finish. So here is with metal at 100% and all of the other settings at 0, it really does create a reflective look, which can also be really beneficial when creating any model that you want to have metallic finish on. Here is the roughness finish. It generally is a pretty normal brush, I would say. It's just a generic, like you get the color that you select, and it's pretty efficient when coloring things as well. It does feel a little bit more like chalk compared to the other ones, but I believe that was just, my personal experience with that brush. And now turning on emission to 100% and turning everything down, you can see it creates a really cool glow effect. It's very, very bright, and I do really, really like it as well. I'm a fan of personally neon colors. Yep, and on the little top of the color, you can also get a preview before you put it on your object. It's just a little bit of a quality of life feature as well. And so here I'm just showing all the bottom things as well. Similar to the sculpting brushes, you have your strength, you have your fall off, and you have your size and resolution. So for strength, it's just basically your opacity of the brush. Lowering it makes the brush or the color a little bit more see-through and lighter. So if you want to do like a blush or a blend of colors, you can really use a lower opacity or lower strength on a brush to create a very light color. And the next setting that I wanted to test would be the fall off. So basically fall off is the it's like the resolution kind of, which sounds weird because there's a setting called resolution, but basically it's how strong and concentrated the color looks. So as you can see, when I first did it with very low fallout, it was very fuzzy, but when I raised the fallout, it became really, really opaque and strong. Resolution also kind of does a similar thing, but I've noticed with the VR application currently, it's having a little bit of a bug where it becomes very glitchy, but basically both settings kind of do the same thing in a general sense. And here I'm using the fill tool, which will be found on the top bar of the brush selection. It's pretty easy to use, the fill tool. Basically, you just tap and select any chunk that you want to recolor. Here I decided to recolor the bear with a little bit of the admissions texture, just so you can see that it will get basically everything. Once again, I was having a little bit of struggle with that ear, just because I'm not sure what happened with the program there, but it's probably a little bug that just needs to be updated out. There you go. I was doing a full walk around because I was in my studio room, so I was able to walk around my whole entire object, which I think is very, very interesting to do for a 3D modeling program, because it gives you like that studio sculpting or ceramics class feel. And here I'm just showing off the extra tools. Basically, you could place down shapes, create any objects, and for this little tutorial, I was going to make a little tiny bow on the top ear just to show that you can make shapes onto things that are already pre-colored. So here I was just putting down 2 pre-made triangles and then the third shape, which would be in the middle. Yep, and to change size, it's all there. It's a little bit complicated because instead of just a generic small or big scale, since this is a 3D program, you work on all planes, including the X, Y, and Z planes. So you basically have to adjust the size. It does come in handy though in the long run. So let's say I'm trying to make a circle that's a little bit more of an oval shape. I would adjust either the X or Y axis. So when you really start to learn what you're doing with this program, it can be really, really time effective and just really generally save you a lot of time when coming to sculpting in a 3D program. And here I'm using a lot of the other tools. I'm using a little bit of the trim tool because I didn't use it previously in my example. I wasn't a big fan of it because it just kind of created a chunky look, and I really wasn't going for that. I believe I end up back in the standard brush, yep, and that is definitely my favorite brush to use. And here I am adding a little bit to the bow, just making it a little bit more round. And also with this object that I'm adding, if it is touching the object itself, so if the bow is touching the bear, it becomes one object essentially when you export it. If they're a little bit separated and 100% intact, they will technically save as 2 different objects, so be wary if you plan to export this to a 3D printing program or 3D printer. They will come out as different objects unless you have a support beam or some form of contact between 2 objects. When I was using Gravity Sketch, I ran into a similar problem where I didn't put down a base. So essentially all my objects I sculpted when I 3D printed them, they printed out completely separated. So it's just something to always keep in mind. And here I'm using the color tool as well. You can lower the range that it'll select with the color fill tool, which I think is very useful. And here I'm just cleaning up that edge. But overall, thank you for watching my quick video, and if you need any help, just rewatch this video or check out the ShapeLab tutorials.